What's up, guys? Ron from Rohde Law, and we're back with another interview with Chris Long. He is the founder of Longyards, and it's an incredible new business concept. Which, if you follow this channel, you know that I love industrial outdoor storage. I'm always talking about new ways to invest in industrial real estate, and what Chris has done is really pretty incredible. He has taken outdoor storage and cut it up into smaller, leasable sizes. So, Chris, tell us more about this awesome idea and your background.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Excited to be here. So it's crazy. I think all businesses start with a problem and you end up finding a solution. I was a contractor in the trades. I'm a licensed carpenter, ran a construction company for 10 years as a general contractor and had a problem storing all my equipment, my tools, my trailers. And it's like, how come, there's not a simple contractor yard? And what I discovered is there's a massive gap in the marketplace. People, if you're looking for, first of all, it's hard to find industrial land to begin with, which I'm sure we're excited to get into. But then if you're looking for a piece of land to lease, typically, if you're lucky, you'll find half an acre, but it's an acre and above in most cases. So what we found is that pocket in the marketplace. It's yards from 2,000 to 20,000 square feet. And we basically take land, carve it up into a bunch of mini yards and rent them out. And that's what Longyards does. And the magic of it is solving so many problems for these little businesses that just need that small space. That's month to month. It's affordable and it's just made for them. And we bring in the containers in the offices. So yeah, excited to dive into it, but I solved the problem for my business. And now, we're on a path for 12 locations and it's just been life changing. So excited to cover all
That's
angles.
awesome. I remember when we first connected and we were chatting. I think you just had one, right? You had the 1 yard.
Right. So we're actually I am a Canadian. Some people might get that accent right away. But so my first location is actually fully up and running in Ottawa, Ontario, which is the capital of Canada. And then when I decided to move to the US, our second, let's call it corporate US flag, is actually in Central Florida in Winter Haven. And that's about wrapping up construction. So we're almost at the finish line with that one. And we had a long lifespan of like entitlements and a whole bunch of stuff we can get into, but a lot of learning curves. And we have one of our first franchisees. He's finally near the end of the process in Abilene. And besides that, we have multiple other locations. So a little bit about the life cycle and where we're at.
Okay. Yeah, I imagine permitting and getting a CO has got to be one of the biggest challenges. That's what we see on the bigger yard spaces, 2, 4, 5 acres. What's the CO process for you like with your use?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we want to make sure that we have different tiers of land in our underwriting process. And we categorize it by like all the way from tier 1 to tier 4, where tier 1 is like you're ready to go, existing business, already in usage. And that is typically the easiest for the CEO. We're obviously on the flip side, what we categorize as a tier 4 is like raw dirt. Now they each come with a pro and a con. You're going to pay less for the raw dirt, but you got a lot more time ahead of you. So how do you navigate that? But we want ideally to scale and grow existing parcels that already have the industrial usage that are ideally heavy industrial. It just allows our process to be that much quicker.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think what we're seeing in infill locations is the more approvals you have, the more shovel ready a parcel is, just the more value it has because it's saving time and reducing uncertainty. So you pay more for an infill location that has an existing. Does it have to have a building on it or just a CO or
That's a great question. So, there's so much. We have an entire funnel, and at first it goes to like total market. We have a TAM, total adjustable market value, and then it goes to the zoning, and then it goes to local building requirements, and then it goes to feasibility. And we go through this funnel to identify parcels, and then at that point, it goes afterwards. So, yeah, it really depends on the property, the zoning. But to answer your question, it really depends on the area. Some places in Texas, if it's no building, they only want to give you 5 years. Now our lenders, and of course, you don't want to build a house and only live in it for 5 years. It's like, no, we want to see this. We're in this for the long game. So to answer your question, it really depends on the existing business. And then even you can get creative by acquiring it. That kind of allows you to sneak underneath the trigger for new entitlement. So yeah, it's some areas they want to complete a structure. Maybe it's just a little office. But if what we're finding in a lot of places, Dallas Fort Worth, we had a property and the land was not enough. That was only conditional. They wanted to see a structure in order to give us the full occupancy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that echoes a lot of what we're running into in DFW too. Is having a building really opens up your uses. I guess walk us through a prototypical yard, because I think for some people that have tuned in this long, they still don't know what we're talking about. Like if you pull up to the yard, is there an office with an office manager? Like what are we seeing? You said containers, but what are the fencing, like lighting, security?
Yeah. So picture self storage, right? You go to your self storage facility, you roll up your door, you go in your unit, do your stuff, go outside. You're typically going on an acre, 1 to 5 acre property, 60 to 100 units, whatever the case. Mine's the same thing except storage yards. So you drive into the road, and on the side, instead of self storage units, it's actually individual yards. And when I say individual yards, it's as simple as that. You open up your gate, you got in a completely enclosed, fenced yard with what we try to bring is power, camera, and if you need an office or a container, we bring it to you as well. So that's basically Longyards. It's contractor storage yards. It's like bringing the self-storage world to industrial real estate.
And how does the rent compare to mini storage? I don't know what kind of price per foot that a what a 10 by 20 would look like. I guess that's really small, but is it
That's
like half the price? Is it a tenth of
a,
the price?
that's a great question. And some of the R&D that we're doing, and we're constantly doing research and development because like there's so much data and we're so new that we need to, we're in it for the long term. So I want to be very focused on markets we could target and what the results are going to be. And it's funny because we're more close to boat and RV and like land price than self storage. And what we're trying to do is to compare the rates of storage yards versus what's the closest tracking metric that we can follow. And self storage is actually the farthest one. So because self storage fluctuates so much in different areas, where there's other comparables that we could track that has a closer doesn't fluctuate as much. It runs a little more parallel. So it's not self storage. It's really funny because some places you're buying land at one price per acre and renting it out for X, where in others you can get it for a lot more and your ROI is higher. And so we've been able to target markets that give us those results. And because we're looking at international, we could laser focus on these markets. But it's not self storage because it's very niche. But we need to find what can we follow to be as predictable as possible with our rates, and that's a journey in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great comment. Self storage is very, very susceptible to supply and demand. And we've seen a ton of building of new supply. So you're probably seeing that in markets that have a similar population. If they've overbuilt mini storage, those rates are coming down. Just they need to get revenue, they need to compete, and so it's not a true metric of what your rates should be because you don't really have competition. And that kind of leads me to my tie-in of what you think the comparable should be, because where are these people storing these trailers and tools before they came here? Like where are they coming from?
Yeah. So if you have any blue collars in your family and anybody listening to this, they're like, where are these guys storing? But if you've ever sat at a dinner table or have an uncle who's a landscaper or a contractor, it is a problem and it's a continual problem. They're either shuffling their equipment around, they're leaving it on job sites. They don't have like a yard that's close to home. And that's the problem. So and we're the solution. And going back to with self-storage, supply and demand, there's a lot of guys out there, and it's not just these contractors and small businesses, it's homeowners, it's hobbyists, and it's also logistic companies, and it's also corporate entities. And we're not just going after one client, we're very diversified with our base of clientele. So, I mean, there is massive market need for what we have. And one of the biggest bottlenecks is industrial real estate. It's finding the right properties and being able to acquire this. And we're solving that not just in one way. So, real estate changed my life and it allowed financial freedom on my first deal. And that was my first Longyards, and it really was a life changer. But then, I had this hat on only looking at, real estate, but we can do land arbitrage. We could take land and that is already approved, and we don't have to necessarily buy it because sometimes the price per acre doesn't necessarily make sense. We can't spend $1 million an acre and do our build out. It's just not feasible. But can we do land arbitrage? Can we go do a lease setup and do a revenue share with the landowner? So there's different ways for us to, expand our model that make it adjustable to the market. It's just a different model.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great if you have that kind of business growth mentality. You make money off of providing a service. and owning the underlying real estate is kind of an option. It's not critical for your path, because again, you don't have like, you're not building a big building, you're not building something super unique that no landlord would agree to. Your structures and your improvements are, for the most part, pretty standard and not intensive. It's not like a big coverage building. So that makes sense as a short term. I'm a landlord. I may lease it to you on a short term basis or even 10 years, because when you're done with the lease and you vacate, I still have my dirt free and clear, ready to build or do whatever I want with it. So that makes sense to be able to grow and serve the needs. So,
Yeah.
well, answer that question then. If you have somebody in the trades, where are the most common places? Are they just storing it at home? Are they putting it in some other warehouse, like an enclosed warehouse, and that's too expensive, or what?
Yeah, so like in my case, I mean, I had three trailers, I had a skid steer, I had a bunch of equipment, and I mean, first of all, my wife was just like, "Chris, our house looks like clean it up." Every time family came over, I had to like make sure everything was presentable and clean. So that was always a challenge. And then between that and mixing up on the job sites, it was always just like mental energy, like where's everything going? There was no home base. So I think that's what a lot of contractors are dealing with. It's like, where can I just get this for 2 weeks until it's being used and out of the way? How long can I leave it on this job site? How much equipment can I leave on the job site? And then it becomes like a logistics nightmare that sometimes you want to avoid. So yeah, I think the biggest, it's not a solution that really exists. And I do think in some cases they're overpaying, because the gap in the marketplace, which is the problem we solve, is these contractors, they need, okay, I need space. Well, what's on the option of marketplace? It's probably a 1 acre office and above space. That's a 3, 5 year triple net lease. And sometimes in a year and a half, you don't know where you're going to be, whether or not you're going to grow twice the size or whether or not the market's going to change and you're now going to the other side of town for your clientele. So by us being month to month, which is, by the way, what SBA loves about us, it allows the affordability and the adaptability for these businesses. So that, it's really supporting them and what they need the most, which is really the power of the business.
What about flex space? So like 100% indoor, you got a 12-foot, 14-foot roll up. I know that I'm pretty involved in the flex space kind of development side, but these contractor garages, they're fully enclosed, but we're talking like 1 to 2,000 square feet. It's just expensive, right? Are they signing those types of leases to pay for 100% enclosed storage?
So that's a question based on the opportunity. So with each parcel, as an example, in Central Florida and Winter Haven, we have 26,000 square feet of warehouse. And we ran what's the highest and best use for the warehousing. And we compared flex versus self-storage. And because we had an undersupplied market and the rates for climate control self-storage were the highest, with the highest best use, we decided to do that. And it's still complementing to our clientele. But flex is a very good marriage with Longyards. You have contractors that need bigger bays. So if the opportunity presents itself with flex warehousing and additional land, that's a Longyards home run. And that's a good location. So flex, I love flex. It's like self-storage for contractors, just on a bigger scale. And there's, with the buildings on the land, it gives you a lower cap rate, higher valuation. But the build out cost, it's a slower return on the ROI. So every opportunity is a little bit unique, and we want to make sure it pencils. And we also want to make sure we're hitting home runs. And if you compare numbers on the flex versus the Longyards, like it's night and day. But in any case, yeah, flex is a great business model, and we love it too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and I think it's great that you really understand the tenant needs, because kind of in my head, right, I don't have that kind of background. Tools, what kind of tools are okay to be stored outside? What's not going to get stolen? What type of materials can be stored outside? And is it a time thing? Is it a time of the year? They don't need to be out in the winter. Um, all sorts of things. I've gone by my tenants' stuff, and different stone materials, different metals can go outside. But obviously, you're not putting wood or some kind of hardy back or fiberboard outside. But it is really interesting what tools. Sometimes they'll put hand tools. Shovels are fine outside. How much does that? I guess again, do you guys understand and make recommendations to people when they come up about, hey, you're going to want to store that inside. We can lease you a container.
Well, my favorite thing about my clients. They're blue collars, get it done type of people. So I don't need to hold their hand. They're looking for a solution in the marketplace that doesn't exist, and they will adapt. And what the beautiful part about this is, I mean, they know what they need. And in the marketplace, there's that price and inconvenience. And where we are is we're just more affordable because it's just land. So they'll go in and they'll set up their own setup. They'll put in a dome as long as it doesn't need permits and it's following the lease requirements, not contaminating the soil, then it's good to go. So a lot of these guys, they're coming into our units, and because we're month to month, we're like, let's see what the data says. But they're staying there a long time and they're setting up, and everything they're setting up is just for them and their business. So you're seeing all these little ecosystems of how different businesses operate. The masons are different than the fence guys and the welders and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And it's really cool to see that. But look, they make it their own home, and these guys are a get it done type of client, which is my favorite.
Well, you probably like that then. The more that they customize their space, the more that they invest a little bit of time to create little lean-tos or different shelters, or, put this equipment here. That makes them stickier tenants and makes them less inclined to leave, even if you raise the rates.
Exactly. We have a very low churn rate, and we played around with our yard size. We have small, medium, large, and we're like, what's going to stick the most? Who's going to stay the longest? What's the data going to tell? And we're evolving that data constantly, and we've evolved. We moved around, but yeah, I mean, even in the self storage world, I'm in a few self storage masterminds. A lot of them want small business clients because typically they stay the longest, and they're consistent with their bill payments because it's a need. They need the space, So yeah, they're great.
Yeah. Well, to answer that, do you have somebody on site 20, like during the business hours, or how does management work?
Yeah, management is based on it's a bit of a each location depending on the capex, the warehousing. But for the Longyards model, it's almost very similar to self storage in a lot of ways with how it's underwritten and the management works. You don't need someone full time.
Okay.
Again, these clients give them a yard, they lock the gate as long as it's safe and they can get to where they're going. They don't need too much hand holding. Now, sometimes you get two or three clients that give you as much work as 55. So you need to kind of hold their hand a little bit and just, make sure they're being dealt with. But it's not, it's a part-time gig, and with a competent manager on site with good systems and operations. We have cameras everywhere. It's very clear, transparent. A lot of that language, most people just being an iOS or industrial storage or self-storage. So we obviously have protocols we want to follow, and it's a little bit different than self-storage because of the way we create our SOPs. But it's not a full-time. It's anywhere from maybe 5 to 15 hours a week, depending on the season.
Okay. So are you guys thinking that's typically self-managed from the investor, or you need to hire somebody to manage? I don't know. It sounds like 3 or 4 locations. Is that the optimal setup to have like a regional manager?
Yeah, so ideally with partners, either a franchisee or a corporate partner, the game plan is to have 3 locations in an area that's somewhat close to home, and then you can have one employee manage the 3 of them. That's kind of like an optimal scenario, and then it's just the economies of scale, and it's very ideal. So yeah, one part-time employer or a full-time for 3 is probably a good metric to aim for.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think everything is similar to other asset classes, but I like to probe and find out where is it different. And obviously, I know why it's better. I mean, I think your demand is through the roof. That's doing another plug for iOS. Is just we're seeing if the economy continues to do whatever it's doing in this weird pause, or inflation's still bad, people will store materials outside even if they were previously indoors. And that's what I like about iOS, is that we're lower lease rates for the same amount of space. And so if you have, your brand new backhoe or excavator, and you say, well, I'm actually storing that inside right now, Ron, 2 years down the road, you might switch that, say, well, I can park it outside and save 20,000 a year on rent. That's significant for some of these businesses, and they're capable of storing it outside. But that's the same thing with long yards, right? You're kind of that minimum cost to properly store something securely, but it is exposed to the elements. So
Yeah, it's a great conversation because I think in a lot of economic uncertainties, there's 2 classes that are pretty consistent. It's the the lowest paying client or the super wealthy. This is the middle class that kind of gets hurt a lot. And with Longyards, it's kind of weird in a few approaches because you have companies that can downsize and benefit, and then you have smaller companies that are upsizing and they can benefit as well. So you get the tail end of all shifts in the marketplace. And because, a little layer on top of everything going on with, as we're seeing AI and the world shift and just jobs are kind of becoming a little uncertain and changing quickly. We're kind of like a foundational business incubator for startups, if you think about it on another light, because we're an affordable place where small business can go get what they need and kind of get started. And that in itself is just a small business incubator that reaches, when you think about it, to a massive audience of just these small business, blue collars. There's so many logistic companies or whatnot. So yeah, I think we benefit. I'm not too worried about the economy. Just being that blue collar mindset. These guys, things are going a little bit weird. Usually it's the blue collars in a lot of cases, health and medicine, and that typically shine through. And we're there. We provide business for them. So
Yeah, I mean it's kind of atypical too to think about, like in the trucking side, when business is good and a lot of these guys are on long haul routes and they're out on the road, they might be on the road like 25 days out of the month, and they say, Ron, I don't need any parking. My 30 trucks, 28 are on the road at any one point in time because we're always picking up and going. It's when the economy slows down, they still have $100,000 truck that they're not going to park it on the street. But then if they're slow, they need a place to park it. So we're thinking our occupancy might actually go up, even if the economy slows down, just with the lack of freight activity. What I like too is, do you do tenant interviews? Like, do you ask them on a somewhat systematic basis, like how their business is doing? What could you do to help them more? Because you said you're in touch, you like kind of do hands off, but I'd be very curious about the data and asking them, what could you guys do? Because maybe you could be a funnel to a flex location or a Longyards that's owned or partnered with. And
yeah, the biggest data that we have right now is like who's our client, the age, the distance you're willing to drive. There's a lot of other metrics. We survey them and we want to know general information, obviously most of their habits, so we can just be very confident with our expansion. I know them pretty well because I just grew up in a blue collar world at 14. I was working in trade, so for a good at least amount of them, I kind of know their habits and behaviors. But the most of the data is like how far are they willing to drive, what distance are they coming from, household income, age, and those kind of things that we want to get dialed in as much as we can. And then we do interview a few of them just to promote to the marketplace. Like, what has it done for you? How is Longyards beneficial to your business? We can use that copywriting and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, we're trying to extract as much as we can from our clients, 100%.
all right, so you're just trying to create a profile right now, more for marketing and to find out what brought them in, so you can fill more yards versus like deep diving into their expansion or what they do for business and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. We're finding such an influx of different avatars of clients. So I haven't, I'm kind of looking at it like a broad net right now. Where are they coming from? What's their habits? And then over time, if I discover there's 30% of this avatar that stays this amount of time, and then my energy and resources can be focused on them. And where do we target and how do we target them? But for now, it's more like as a broad sense. Like I want to make sure that the mass data is as trackable as possible, and then I could get more granular as time goes on. And we are a startup, so we also have bandwidth on our corporate side. We can only study and do so much on R&D. And between looking at land, zoning parcels, the zoning, building code requirements, studying our clients, well, we're heavily focused on acquisitions and supporting corporate and franchise partners as well. So I think at this point, there's always room for improvement, but we have a pretty good hold on who our clients are and what's important to them.
Awesome. What about technology? Are you guys using like software to do billing? Are you doing text messaging? Like, how's that?
Yeah, we have a lot of automations. And what's beautiful about Longyards, you pull up to the front gate, there's a QR code, you scan it, goes to our website, you can literally DocuSign the agreement, upload your credit card, get a lease, welcome video, here's your yard info, done, hands off. And what's really neat about our facility too is you can text the gate. So if you're renting a yard, you're storing, let's say, masonry equipment, and you got your crew or a homeowner coming to look at a certain type of stone, You could track them, come into the yard, text the gate, open it. They're getting a little VIP service. We can manually open the gate from the cell phone while you're watching the cameras, follow them in the yard. Then you can have a grid system on your fence, ABC to 1, 2, whatever. And then you can literally go look at pile B7 and you see the client talking to the landscaper and they're looking at the exact stone, all virtual. So we're really kind of diving in on the software side. We want to automate that as much as possible. And we feel like we have already a good leg up, but with constant tech and innovation, we're always trying to improve. But yeah, we rely heavily on tech, which just reduces the man
Is that
hours.
a third party software?
Yeah, I mean, that's Easy Storage Solutions.
Okay,
So
we'll drop the link. What's the name of it?
Easy
I'm
Storage
curious.
Solutions.
Okay, yeah, I use Easy Storage as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So the text to open the gate is part of their
yeah,
access
yeah,
control.
yeah.
Okay.
Not a lot of people know that.
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, we have one of the newer LiftMaster units that is Wi-Fi enabled, and you can. Is it so? It goes through like MyQ or not?
Well, the software is PDK that integrates with ESS. So
Okay.
how that all integrates, I'm not to that level, but we run all the conduits and do the prep, but we have the experts come out. We just do the final troubleshooting.
Yeah, that's
But
crazy.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense that you want to embrace that technology because the more remote that you can make your product, just the better it's going to be for everything, for daily, for customer experience, and then also for exit. Right? You can sell it to an investor and say, hey, you can buy this yard and not 90% remote, but you don't need to have somebody on site 40 hours a week like a mini storage because again, I think the comparisons there to mini storage are retail customers that you're not as repeat. So you get a lot of new people. And when new people are walking up, I want somebody to talk to them versus, with business tenants and industrial, we get the same guys. Once they know the drill and it works, then they're good. I think that's pretty futuristic that you can control and watch. And you said the tenants have access to your cameras
Yeah, so
displays online.
we give them access to the main cameras so they could it's kind of like a community feel, right? We want everybody to know that they're looking out for each other and everyone looks out for their neighbor. And that's kind of a cool thing. I don't know if it's more of a Canadian thing. We'll find out how that works in the States. you
I
know,
mean, I look. I'm a lawyer. I'm trying to think of is there a liability reason you wouldn't want people to have access to it?
it's
And
it's the sound is the biggest thing. So you have to disclose it in the lease agreement, and you should remove the sound so people can't hear. And then as long
so
as you
no
have
audio.
Yeah, and then as long as you have visual representation on the fencing and in the entrance that it's under video surveillance, which is pretty standard for a lot of facilities, then that's understandable. They don't have control; they just have visual access.
Okay, yeah. So they don't have control. They have view only, and no. I think no audio is right. Whoever told you that legal advice is probably good. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. There's no expectation of privacy. There's no constitutional issue, and you disclose it. But then you get the benefit, in my perspective, the tenants who have higher value stuff, or the tenants who are just more neurotic, they can check their cameras and they can watch it all the time if they want, and it allows them to lease from you or pay a premium to be right underneath the camera as opposed to the side. And they say, "Oh, I have my mom's lawnmower in here. It's really really valuable. I want to watch it all the time." You say, "Yeah, no problem. We can give that to you." Versus my setup, it do have remote cameras, and I have it. I have it all on my phone. Um, I don't let them access, so they have to message us if they want footage from a particular time.
Got you.
They don't get real time. They don't get the live access. But and again, it's pretty infrequent. But sometimes tenants do. They'll message or say, "Hey, something happened," or "Can you just pull up this footage and send it to me?" And it's a little bit of work. But what you have is, "Hey, I don't want to do any work. I'll just give you access." Um,
And
so
it's twofold. It's for the sense of security, which is one of our biggest things. We want, it's the blue branding. It's that sense of security. It's a sense of being a high level above everything else in the marketplace for outside storage. But it's also a little bit of a brag thing. So, if you're a contractor, you're with your friends and family or whatnot, like, yeah, look at Longyards. And people, you're explaining Longyards, like, well, look at these cameras, all right? Because sometimes people listening, they're like, it might take them like 5 or 10 minutes to get it. You show a video or a picture, boom, it's instant. So it's an education process, my business. And the more value we can create and support these small businesses, the more they're going to want to tell about it. And that's how we get more clients, you know? So it's just, it compounds.
That's like, no, I think that's a great advice. I'm going to look into sharing my cameras with them because I can't see any downside. And to your point too, if they have a new truck or they want to show somebody, oh, look how tech automated where I park is. I can look at my truck 24 hours a day and know that it's there. That's valuable. And then if they advertise too, I would probably say we're the only truck parking yards that let you monitor your own stuff, watch your own stuff in real time. That's capable, but I don't think other people are doing it, right? But it doesn't cost you anything too. That's the other crazy thing.
Yeah, it's free. And there's a future to this as well. Now we're exploring this, but we can get automated drones, you know, where it can literally go fly around every few hours and it can have sensors on the fence panels. So say anyone's coming around and a fence panel gets vibrations through theft in the middle of the night or whatnot, it'll automatically go and alert them and alert the authorities, or you can censor however you want it. So that's really cool. So just imagine pulling into your gate and you see the automated drone just flashing blue and red. And then like, you're like, oh my God, this, I feel like I'm in like a police impound lot or something like.
Yeah, it doesn't have a gun on there.
That's
Maybe a taser.
yeah. Maybe in Texas or Florida, but not in Canada. You could have like a little water pistol, but you know, in the US, it's like an M4.
How comical would that be though? Like somebody is cutting your fence and then a little drone comes up and just shoots them in the face with a water gun.
That's how
They'd
we.
be more surprised and be like,
Oh,
wow.
that's how we keep our managers on track. We go and follow them with the drone and spray them when they're not moving fast enough. That's our
But
efficiency.
yeah, I mean that's a great example. I think in particular for iOS, right? We have these large lots that are fairly large coverage. It's hard to get cameras on every square foot of a 5 acre or 4 acre property, but the drone could easily access it from its charging dock. In addition to doing a perimeter scan. Yeah, I want to look into. So, do you know of any drone patrols? Because how does that run with like the FAA? I guess it could be piloted from somebody remotely at the time, like observed
Yeah.
when it flies. But it can be remote, right? You could pay somebody $6 a day in the Philippines to be like, "Hey, you sit there, you control the drone. It's going to go and go automated. If anything happens, if you see it flying towards a baby, you hit stop, you take control." But I feel like that's all they want. They just want a human to be able to take control, but not necessarily hit any buttons.
Yeah, and I believe different states and different areas have different laws and requirements on that. So
Well, it's largely federal. It's largely governed under federal law. It's like usurped for FAA jurisdiction. So that's the good thing for us though. I don't think it's too much state or local.
okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't gone
I
to
mean,
that.
they may have other ordinances that they interpret, but in terms of the flying, the pilot license, and that sort of thing, it's federal right now. So
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, we'd love to get into that space in the future, but for now, not yet. I mean, the prices, some of them, like, they want to charge like 16 grand a month for an automated drone. You're like, okay, you know, we're not a $45 million facility. You know, we're
yeah,
a storage yard, so there needs to be a bit of a market adjustment, I think, for drones. But they're I think the automations and what you're talking about, the remote that you can have a VA do, because even we have VAs watch the cameras at night, right? Just
hmm
check in. Very, very feasible.
yeah. I mean, that's to me, that's the future. That's leveraging technology and robotics, or we won't use the buzzword AI, but just to supplement human abilities, so that you could have somebody remote monitor 14 facilities, 20 facilities, right? You could easily do that from a remote location, as opposed to the old days. Somebody would have to be here in Dallas driving around, and oh, I get a phone call or some sensor trip, so I triggered a landline phone call, and I have to go drive out there and put eyes on it. Huge waste of resources and time.
Oh my God, for many reasons. So we're vertically integrated. We go, we find the land, and we can do entitlements, construction development, and then management and lease up. So, when we're set up with a little office and we got this remote drone, we can literally oversee the construction and development live with these drones. Literally fly up to the bulldozer guy, check the surveyor, making sure that the site work is done, the underground conduit's being done. And you can probably eliminate 80% of the infield work with the management at the least by having, because it's so focused. Like you get real time and you could just meet with the guys, put on a headset, you're talking to them and you're following them around on a drone from halfway around the world. How cool is that, right?
Yeah, I mean, how much improvements do you have? And this is just kind of wrap up too. We'll kind of close on this one. So tell us, I guess, a little bit about the improvement process because you're putting gravel down. What kind of fencing are we having?
Yeah, so we use a modular fencing system. It's like a hybrid. It's a little bit unique to the marketplace because the fencing actually moves around. So it adapts. If a client, there's two medium-sized yards and they're only ones that left, and the client wants a large one, we remove the fencing in the middle. But it's not just like your temporary fence. It's more like it slides into concrete. So we use a hybrid model of
Okay.
like bringing two worlds together. And because I'm a builder and I just love innovation, I introduced that to the Longyards model myself. And I mean, yeah, if you're looking between a 3 and 8 acre facility, the build out is still not inexpensive. It's between $300,000 and $800,000. You have your underground conduit, your electrical, you got your cameras, you got your fencing. Fencing, in Florida, we're being quoted $55 a foot. So, we can do it less, but it's still not cheap. But the return is still very faster, and the impact on the facility as a whole is still definitely worth it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Your improvements are still very temporary. You can even the conduit stuff, but there's no foundation, there's no structural permitting and vertical construction. The modular stuff, you could pack it up and move it to another site theoretically, right?
And that's exactly, we're a land banking business in a way. So 5 or 10, eventually the land in a lot of cases becomes worth more than the business on the land. So with a lot of businesses, you can't just tear down your self-storage building. It's not efficient. Us, pack up your fencing, go to the next site, or sell it. We have that versatility. It's like self-storage on steroids. I kind of explain to people. So it's fast build out, it's modular, and it's adaptable, and it could be taken with you. So it's just a lot different than what's in the marketplace.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Well, Chris, it was great chatting with you. Love to hear about the growth and kind of the path. So, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, then go to the website, longyards.com, complete a form. You could also email me directly, clong@longyards.com, and always happy to meet new people.
Awesome. Well, it was great chatting. We'll have to check out one of the facilities in person. You said the Abilene. That's probably the closest one, right? For me,
But yeah, you're in Dallas?
I'm in Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah, so Abilene would be the closest one. We had the one, Dallas Fort Worth, but that fell through the cracks, unfortunately. North Houston, we have a territory secured, but it's still preliminary in the development. So yeah, Abilene is probably going to be the first one to the finish
Okay.
line close to
Well,
you.
I'd love to do a on-site tour. Maybe if you come down for the grand opening, or I'll just drive out there with the owner.
That'd be really cool. I love that.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to this Longyards iOS mini storage on steroids, and we'll see you next time.